All right, hello and welcome everyone. This is our first Best of Show presentation, so I'm excited that everybody's here joining us for an hour today. My name is Alyssa Foster. I work as a program education coordinator at ACUA. I just wanted to introduce Sarah Meaney and go over a couple things about today's presentation. Sarah Meaney is from the Kwakuho region. She's an Associate Director of Residence Life at Miami University, Oxford. A couple things today. This is a webinar format, so to be engaged, if you would like to talk in the chat, you can. There's also a Q&A function where you can be anonymous if you so need. If you raise your hand and want to speak, me or Sarah can allow you to be the host or allow you to speak and be heard. So if that's something of interest to you, please share. At the end of this presentation, I have a very small assessment, and it's just to kind of ask how satisfied you were with this presentation and then also gain a little bit of interest for future presentations. And yeah, with that, let's go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you. Go ahead and share my screen. All right. All right. Hi, everyone. So as Alyssa said, my name is Sarah Meaney. I'm the Associate Director for Residential Academic Initiatives at Miami University, located in Oxford, Ohio, so not in Florida. This is just a little bit of a different format. So this is a presentation I've given in person, and now I am presenting to myself. So I'm it's like getting a lot of COVID days flashback. But I hope you enjoy the presentation, and this is supposed to be engaging. So using that chat function or raising your hand is going to be important as we go through the presentation, so I can hear from you as well. I don't think we have a ton of people on the call, so we should be okay. We're all friends here. There's 16 of us. Let's just talk about event planning. So basically, this topic was important for really it started in our department. We found that we had professionals who were just right. They're starting out, but again, coming out of the COVID years, college was disrupted. We had fewer people who had direct residence life experience. And so then you have people coming into the role, they might be in their second year, third year, and they still maybe feel a little shaky about how to actually like put on an event, right? Where I talk about event production, that's kind of large scale, but we're also thinking about programming. So and the scaling of those things. So shouldn't, again, that feeling of like, shouldn't I be good at this by now? Like I've been in the field enough. I really should just be able to put these things on, and I still get a little nervous about it. So this session is really to break down all of the steps of planning. So we'll talk about kind of in detail the 10 steps of effective program planning. We will talk about the kind of thinking about your specific context on your campus and the logistics around that. And then we're going to practice adapting. So just I got to practice adaptability in the last 15 minutes. So right, I thought we were going to have discussion rooms. I thought I thought this was a Zoom meeting, not a webinar. So right now I'm adapting how I am putting on this, just even the session. So kind of the first thing in terms of engagement, I just want to pulse check. So if you could put in the chat what you kind of where you're at. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being I can't even plan a dinner out with a friend, so that's 1. 2, I can do event production as a professional, like you could pay me to put this stuff on. Kind of how do you feel like you are in your skills? If you could just drop that number in the chat. All right. Okay, this group is doing well. So what I'll say to all of you who seem like you're feeling pretty good about program planning is that this webinar will be recorded. And maybe this is something that you can share with your RA teams or your entry-level staff, something that they can, right, watch this in your office, and then we'll talk about it in training. that could be a way to use this resource. I'm also happy to share slides if that's something that you would like to email me. But I just want to just to understand a little bit like where you're at as an audience. But if also if you can drop in the chat or just raise your hand and we'll just call on you. All we'll hear is your voice. We won't see your face. But what makes you feel this way? Why did you rank yourself the number that you? And Alyssa's going to help me out with hand raising. So again, the question is, why did you pick the number that you picked? All right, so Max says, I think about campus partners and logistics. That is a big part of event planning for sure. Anybody else? Why did you rate yourself the way that you did? All right, Linda shares, honestly, having two kids, this is also my life, Linda. Having two kids and getting everyone where and when they need to be has improved my logistical skills. I do not know how you are a mom or even a parent, a caregiver, anybody with kids, anybody connected to kids. I don't know how you can do it without being so on top of your stuff. So John says, confident in doing the logistics, but keeping getting older. Traditional college students are still the same age, so interests are changing. I feel that, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we reconnect with what they want before we just start planning events. Things that I thought were cool when I was even a student are not as fun anymore. But that's a really good point, John. And then Tyler says familiar processes can be processed the same way, following the same planning plan. Yeah. So getting like Tyler's feeling in the groove, right? Okay, I've done this before. Oh man, yes. The kid thing is real. You're basically a professional event planner anyways if you have children. um so right, that getting used to, you're in the swing of things. So okay, thanks for sharing. Oh, Catherine, wonderful. So help two professional conferences with folks. Oh my goodness, yes. I hope you put a 10 for yourself. I've also been on the planning host team, and it is you just get to know this stuff. So Catherine created process documentation and checklist for the first time. It made it much easier the second time. Yes. So you don't have to necessarily start from scratch every time. You can kind of leave yourself some breadcrumbs for the next event, new content, new situation, but you kind of follow the same steps. That is what what we're going to be talking about today in our session. So that's a good pulse check. So let's dive in to those steps for program planning. So as John threw out there, right, we want to assess. We want to understand what the students need. What they need might be something that we can do looking at our data sets, right? So if you look at a roster of your residence hall, you're like, okay, I've got a lot of first gen students. I've got a lot of out of state students. You can just look at a roster and start seeing groups of people to see like maybe you need these things. I have 50 people all taking calculus. I'm getting some ideas around an event, right? So that might be a need. That can be something that we see when we look at the students as a whole. But really talking about like, well, what do they need? What do they want? And a lot of that comes from asking them directly. So that could be throwing a survey out to the hall, talking with students in focus groups, having if you have a, hall government, you have your RAs who are right there living in student life. And so talking through what would this look like? That could just be a big brainstorm of events, and then you can kind of pull together themes like, oh, I'm sensing people are really loving what's something that's making bouquets. So some of our halls, they are just on fire for having a bunch of flowers and making a bouquet. All right, that would never be on my radar. But it was something that I thought was cool and helpful. So again, by asking them, we're assessing what their needs are. So that is the first step, just assessing what is it that we should even be putting an event on about. And then the next is creating the objective for the program, right? So like, what's the goal? Sometimes the goal is I want you to learn something. Sometimes the goal is I want you to meet this faculty member so you're not scared of faculty members anymore. This is a pure community building event. all of those different objectives, they shape the event in a different way. So thinking about what those are on the front end is really helpful when you start getting into the details and making decisions about what's in and what's out, right? Do we have to have pizza for I want you to learn something where we know that might draw people, but it's not really about community building. That one's about learning something. So maybe we forego snacks this time. Um, so it's just something to consider as you are starting the event. Then the next step is thinking about who do we need to involve, right? Is this event put on? I guess I'm centering myself as thinking about I'm the hall director. I'm the professional residence life staff member, and I have a group of RAs. I'm not sure where everyone is here, right? If that's your current role, but that's when I'm kind of talking these things out. That's I'm thinking about that me in that role. But right, involve others. Am I just doing this as the head of hall? I'm doing it myself. I don't really need a lot of extra help. Or am I starting to pull in my RAs? Am I delegating it out to them? Who is involved? Do we have a guest speaker? Do I have a campus partner? So when I'm thinking about which group of people is in charge, who are the other players, and how do we get there? So that is the involving others. Um, and then after that, and involve others is step one, and then delegate, right? So deciding, is this such an important event, right? If you're given the task of one DEI program a semester, and it can't fail. Okay, maybe I do need to be the one who is in charge of the whole thing, and I'm not delegating that out. But maybe if it's a weekly hall social, do I have to be in charge of the whole thing from front to finish? Probably not. And there's maybe a lower threshold of like, if this program doesn't succeed, it's okay. But if we have a fail on a diversity and inclusion program, that could look really bad for the hall. That could hurt the students who are part of those marginalized identities, right? So thinking through, is it the time to delegate or not? Okay. So then we are starting, right? The idea is coming to fruition. So now we're into the loose planning phase. So kind of what are we doing? A date and time, right? Kind of just the skeleton. Did we book a room, right? So those things feel a little bit more concrete, but that's where we can start getting more detailed in kind of 4 and 5 kind of come together. So that loose planning, thinking through kind of the initial steps. Oops, I skipped over this. Okay, so the next is the planning the actual program, right? So now we are in the phase of doing. Who are our volunteers? Okay, I need to buy the pizza, or I need to at least schedule to have the pizzas made and delivered. I'm buying the materials. I'm getting the flowers for the bouquets. um I'm looking at the facilities that I have. It's the you're putting pen to paper, you're booking things, it becomes a reality. Um but as we know, and number 6 tells us that we can't have a successful event if we don't tell anybody about it. So when you could do all of the steps, all 10 steps, and if you don't do number 6, your program is going to fail. um People have to know, this is the key piece of event planning, is that you have to tell people that something's going on. I'm a pretty engaged community member in Oxford. It's a small town. When the students are here, it's a really small town. But the communication on what's going on in town is so excellent that I never have to wonder what's happening. Like, it's coming to me. I don't necessarily have to seek it out. So thinking about publicizing as a key piece of event production, so you don't do all this work and then nobody comes. That's one of the worst feelings. This publicizing could be something that maybe, if you're feeling comfortable and you've got a strong person, not just the person in marketing, but people who can energize a hall around doing something. I had a person on staff, couldn't make a craft, couldn't make a door deck to save their life. But they were awesome at like drumming up enthusiasm. So I'm like, okay, I have this event that's happening. I've told people about it, but I sent that person out to help me get people excited and bring them down to the hall. So that's a real short term publicizing, but it can't be underestimated how, like, even short term, long term publicizing of your event. How does that work? So again, don't forget to publicize. Super important. Okay, so continuing on, we are approaching the event. So you're going to do some final checks and follow-ups. you have a speaker coming in. Hey, just we're excited to see you in 3 days. Here's the general layout of the event. Do you need anything else? Okay, I put the order in for the pizza. I'm gonna call the restaurant again a couple of days ahead of time. Hey, you got my order? Just making sure we're good. You're gonna deliver it here. Okay. So right, those final checks coming up to the event. And then finally, you put on the event, or it's the day of the program. Um, so the day of, you're making sure that your room is ready. If you need to transport people, all of the things are ready to go. You also need to be early. So if you are putting on an event, never plan to show up the moment that it starts. Even if you delegate it, I would give yourself at least a half an hour buffer of like, get in the space and okay, does the technology work and how do I work the lights and oh, it's a little chilly, let me turn up the thermostat, right? So thinking about day of, you just know that you need to be a little bit more involved. Um, or the day of the program. And then at the program, what is your role in the event? Sometimes I schedule speakers to come in. My only role might be to open the front door of the building and they come in and then they've got it from there. Other people might need, hey, I need you to introduce me, or I'm speaking, right? So Alyssa is like my helper, right? So she is the one who's putting on this event. And I am the content expert coming in. And so I'm like, as the person, I'm looking to her to help if there are things that like, oh, I don't know how to work this button, or we had a tech fail or whatever. So you need to be that for kind of whatever's happening in the event space. So that's the at the program piece. And of course, troubleshooting, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. And then next is after the event. So it's nice, oh, we put all this work in. That was amazing. Okay, we cleaned up. Oh, that's part of the after event. We cleaned up all the stuff. That's another thing to get help with delegating. But then there's the, hey, excuse me, I want to send out some thank you cards. Again, if you have a speaker or a campus partner, maybe all your RAs sign the card, you send it off. That's just a nice touch. And it's not just a nice touch of you building a relationship with that partner. It's a nice touch for the partner thinking that your whole department is pretty fly. It's very professional. So you kind of, in those small moments, you build a good reputation for your department. Even though it's you, right, and you and that one person building a relationship, but it says something about your entire department, which is great. So thinking about that kind of after the event. One more piece after the event, this is, I would say, like super gold stars, is to assess, right? How did the event go? So pulling all of your students together, right? So if you've got an RA team who helped you do this, okay, what went well, what didn't, what will we change for next time? I'm a fan of the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that is a way that I really enjoy to break down, okay, what really did go well that we would never want to change for the future. And then weaknesses usually turn into opportunities. And then threats can be things like weather, or other things that happen. But that's just a helpful way. Recommendations or assessment questions for residents. Yeah, so Max asked this in the chat. I would say it depends. We got to go back to the goals. So what was the point of you putting on this event? And then that's going to guide what kind of questions that you ask. So if I wanted you to learn something, I'm not necessarily going to ask, did you make a new friend? Right? Or did you meet someone? Did you talk to somebody you haven't talked to before? Because that really wasn't the point of the event. So assessment does need to be event specific. So thinking through, what did I want them to get out of this? And then you ask the questions of, okay, what did you feel? So if it is we took a trip to Kings Island is our amusement park. You're not from Ohio. So if you take a trip somewhere and it was for fun, right? Went to an amusement park, that might be, how well was the trip organized? Um, did you need extra money? Like, were you unprepared for something that we didn't tell you about? How were the logistics? Was it clear what we were doing and when we were leaving? Did you make a new friend, or did you hang out with someone you hadn't hung out with before? So those are all things that you can think about as you assess. But thanks, Max. That's a good idea. And then finally, just thinking about some general tips, right? Front loading. So trying to get a lot of that planning ahead of time. The more prepared you are for an event, the smoother it's going to go, and the more calm you are when you have to adapt. So, if you kind of threw a program together on a Thursday for a Saturday, and now it's Saturday and everything's falling apart, you haven't been thinking much about the event. So getting ahead of things is really helpful, and front loading that planning and thinking so then you can just execute when it's time. And then finally, right, we want to teach students the steps. So what your you've done this, right? I see a lot of experienced planners. We have to break these things down, just like I'm breaking it down for our new professional staff. We need to break it down for our RAs, and anyone, right? Any of our student leaders, if that's RHA, that's our hall government team. They I think there is a natural ability with some of this stuff, but also it can absolutely be taught, and we should teach them. So I just wanted to run through all of those things. So I guess any other questions, Max? Thanks for jumping in. If you have any other questions about kind of that 10 steps, just go ahead and throw them out. But I am going to move on to our next slide. So those were the 10 steps. And then I just wanted to give this like broad example of just what that timeline feels like. And I think it's helpful. If you look down at the bottom of the slide, it says idea, and then there's a red arrow pointing over to the real event. And so basically the intensity of thought and energy around what you're doing is going to increase as the date approaches. Um, so again, it's an idea, and right, students I think are really good with the idea part, but it's the executing an actual event. It's turning the idea into actual hamburgers that students can eat. Is the part where we get lost sometimes. We ourselves as professionals, or when we're working with students. So again, that idea all the way to the real event. So the idea starts with the what and the why. What do we want our event to be? Why do we want to do this? So we're just thinking. And then we move through who needs to be involved, and then how 1, 2, and 3 is starting to get those steps closer to the actual event. So the how one, we're broad planning, date and time, we're going to get the marketing, the how number 2. So what smaller details need to be considered? And this is the part where you're really trying to imagine the event from start to finish in your mind. So I'm putting on a potluck. Okay, people are bringing the food. That's great. I'm standing in line for the food, and I need to have a plate. Yes, you need a plate. Okay, so and then I need a fork, and somebody's bringing a soup, so I need a spoon, and now I need bowls. Right. So thinking through, like, and actually visualizing what this thing is going to look like is going to help you um, pre-plan on some of those small detail things that you might miss until you're like, "Ah, I should have gotten plates. Now people just have to hold the spaghetti in their hands." That's not true. And So it's just thinking through that. And then of course, how 3 is the actual execution. It's the day of the event. You're paying attention. And you're problem solving. So I like showing this to our staff just to help them see that it ramps up. It ramps up as you get closer to the actually executing the thing that you wanted to do. Okay, so let's talk logistics. So how do we actually do this? Now, obviously, this is going to be campus specific to you, but I want to guide you through some thoughts and questions that I think are pretty ubiquitous, right? At all campuses are going to kind of function in the same way in terms of these events. So first is the basics. I'm going to say that like 95% of our programming happens within our residence halls. And the for the head of hall, right, for the hall director, they have pretty much unfettered access and control over all of the space, over the timing, over the food. So all of that is within their control. So really, at the basic level, that makes it pretty easy to put on an event. You don't need to worry about reserving anything. You probably don't have catering rules. So it's just about like, okay, I have control over this space and we're doing it in hall. So it should be pretty basic. So the main things you need to think about are your date and your time and your marketing, right? So check for conflicts. You don't want your hall event to be up against, I don't know, the homecoming game, or you have all sorority women and you're planning things on Sunday nights when all of their chapter meetings are happening. That's unhelpful. So thinking about the conflicts that are naturally happening for the students who live in your building. And then of course you're going to market out your event. So email, posters, word of mouth, Social media is something that I'm guessing other places have been experimenting with. We have hall social media accounts, which are really neat and helpful when we're trying to, kind of that early advertising, and then as we're getting closer. Um, so that's another way that you can market. Of course, you have your location, which is going to probably be somewhere in your hall or very nearby outside. Outside spaces might be a little trickier, so you got to check your rules on that. But we have patios that are attached to our halls, and that's pretty much considered hall space. And you might need to put a little note up that says, "Hey, we're having an event in here, so don't study in the main lobby on this day." And then finally, food. So if you're having food for your event, you need to order it. And then at Miami, we have this strange thing called a hosting document where we have to tell our accounts payable these are the people who attended this event, or here's the group of people who maybe not by name, but we ordered pizzas for 25 residents in Anderson Hall. If that's something that your school needs to do, just follow your procedure. So again, that's pretty basic. That's RAs doing stuff. That's called government. But then we get to advanced features when we leave the building. So the advanced settings um, are going to be around location. So know your options and know what your venues require in terms of catering. So again, the basics is in hall. Once we get out, you need to understand what locations are even available, and then what are the rules with those venues. We have well, I can talk about that in the location slide, but just knowing when those things are happening. Another advanced setting is leaving campus. Oh my gosh, do I love students leaving campus and exploring our beautiful corner of Southwest Ohio and Cincinnati, Indianapolis. Like we've got really great stuff around here. But travel off campus can be difficult to coordinate, and understanding what are your rules around personal vehicles, rental cars, school buses, charter buses, that's important to think about travel. And then also contracts. Contracts are just a lot bigger deal. And we'll talk about that in a second. Oops. Okay, so location. This is a helpful link to all of Miami's on-campus locations. But can you put in the chat, or just raise your hand? But chat is probably gonna be better. What are some common rentable non-res hall spaces on college campuses in general? You can think about your campus, but just kind of think broad. So I'm gonna call you back to engaging with me. I know I've been talking at you for a while. So okay, student union, perfect. Yes, green spaces, quads, definitely. Yep. So inside the student center, so your ballroom, you might have hallways, coffee shops, rec spaces, different auditoriums on campus. Yes. Gym. Yes, Max. Oh, a movie theater. Ben, you're fancy. Look at your campus with a movie theater and a bowling alley. We don't have that, but I love it. Library, that's cool. That's a neat one, Emily. So common spaces in the library or additional, and definitely classrooms. Um, we do a takeover of our student center. It stays open late. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So right, we have these venues on our campus. You can probably think of very specific ones. Um, oh yes, which is now, so think about your campus. And then yeah, what are the other spaces that you can rent? So something on Miami's campus specifically is our formal garden. So we have these beautiful outdoor gardens that if we were to put on an event there, we'd want to tell somebody about it. I guess, do you have any good examples that are maybe a little bit unique? Really, Ben's movie theater and bowling alley is kind of blowing my mind. I love it. All right. Well, oh, thank you. Oh, at the baseball seat, the sports dome. This is awesome. Thank you for jumping in. I mean, these are things that I would never, right? Other campuses don't have those facilities. We can't all be at FSU like that. I love it. Yeah, so some places are quite large. I like Miami is not small, but we're not rocking 50,000 students either. So, so now what I want you to do is take a minute and pull up your search your event locations on campus. As I was researching this presentation, I started kind of scouting around Miami's website, and that is where I came across kind of this link here in the location. Um, but it lists all of like kind of the common places to rent, and then like a website to go to or a person that you can call. All the sites, right? How space is allocated on campus can be really tricky, and it can be really political. So, right, the student center is all on one system, and that is reviewed by this person in the student center. But across the street, we have another center that kind of used to be the hub, but it's a different one now. That center is controlled by a whole different electronic system, and you have to call different people to get rooms set up. So, right, even a space that's just across the street, it's totally different in how you access it. So, finding a space where you can see all of those rules can help not just with you as a professional development, but also for your staff. Is when they're thinking maybe like, oh, I want to rent out the bowling alley for an event. Okay, cool. The bowling alley is controlled by Bob out of physical facilities, not the same as our classroom rental, not the same as the student union rental. So knowing that website, I'm hoping you're looking this up right while I'm talking. Um, but look how can you actually book those spaces? Because I mean Miami has a fun one. We have an ice hockey rink and we have a club lounge that we can reserve for events. And that is a whole another person. There's not even a website. You have to call this number to reserve. So knowing the nuances, especially if you're exiting your building, you need to know what those campus-based nuances are. And then finally, as you're looking up those spaces, it's thinking about what are the rules. So do I have to pay money to rent the bowling alley or to rent out the sports dome? That sounds like something I would spend money on. So we do have some campus spaces that are free. We try and nudge our staff towards those spaces. Hey, this is free, but it's free and you have to use the catering. So thinking about the catering rules in your different campus spaces, can you bring in food? What does that look like? And the rules sometimes change from year to year. So not always, but it is helpful to keep people posted on that because you don't want to get a fine or a fee. You know, in our student center, you can only use their catering. So if you bring in pizzas, they fine you because you should have used the pizzas at the student center. So thinking through that, hopefully that's not the case in your residence halls, but you might have deals. I don't know. You'd have to ask your own people. Another part is if you're using technology in the space. So does the technology cost in the room add another fee? And then finally, do you get an office discount? Sometimes, right, like, well, for our outside people, yes, we would charge them money, but you're a current employee with a student group, so no, we wouldn't charge you. And that's important to know as you start thinking about spaces to book. Um, so it is right, those are all of the logistics. When you exit the hall, things get more complicated, but complicated is good because we can do an event with more people. We can get them out of their space. It can be a little bit more creative and fun. So you just have more options when you exit your own residential space. Yeah, so basically, what are the rules for that space rental? Okay. So next up is traveling off campus. Ben says it's also helpful to know who is in your division. For instance, the union, the bowling alley, the movie theater, ballrooms. You have a painting studio on your. I can't even with you. Okay, so in the student affairs umbrella, we have all of these really cool offices and units that are through the student union. Which makes it maybe, and I feel the same way. Our student union is in with student life and we're tight and we use the space all the time. But the athletic facilities, this is such a great point, or academic spaces are outside of student affairs, which maybe makes the nuances a little bit different. And you're not interacting with those people as much. So yeah, that's a great point, Ben. Thank you. So traveling off campus, here are some ways that you can get students off of campus, but each of those ways run different maybe liabilities for your institution, right? So one option would be personal student vehicles. Yep, students have cars. can any random resident, can the RA drive? Could I drive? It's important to know what your campus rules are about driving students. So like Miami, we're okay if students drive students, but we're not okay if staff drive students. And then where does that leave RAs? Are they staff or are they students? Um, so knowing your policies around that can make this easier or harder. Next is rental vehicles. So we have a deal with an enterprise in town, and that is how we rent vehicles. Um, you're still looking at cars or maybe minivans. They might have a 12 passenger, like a Sprinter van, but it's not guaranteed. So rental vehicles, and then who can drive? Do you need to be certified? Right, rental vehicles can have their own complications. You got to pay for the gas and get to and from the rental site, all that good stuff. Next are buses. So I'm kind of going from small to big. So buses could be just a school bus. We need to get 50 people to an apple orchard that's like 10 minutes away. We don't need to travel in luxury. Or a charter bus. We're going to take students to a conference that's about 3 hours away. We're going to probably want a nicer bus. So thinking through what those look like. Go ahead and if you haven't yet, but search vehicle rental on your campus's website to see if they're giving you any clues. Miami tries to they try to help, especially a lot of student organizations, like how do we transport our members to different sites. Um, so search that on your website. But those are kind of the tiers that at least contextually we use at Miami. But what other options do you have? Do you have a fleet of vehicles? How intense are the rules around driving students? Do you even want to drive students? So that's going to be up to everybody's different legal counsels on how they want to get students around campus. Um, but really, what are the rules for student transportation? You need to know that before you're like, okay, the hall wants to go to a haunted house. Okay, we have a lot of questions that we need to get answered before we can even set the date. So thinking through the rules of getting them off campus. All right, and then finally, contracts. So contracts are a really big deal. We don't, I mean, I guess they're a big deal for us. I would imagine they are a big deal for all of our campuses. Um, but these could be, there's just contracts for everything. T-shirts, food trucks, Ferris wheels. Um, Really, there's just a ton of stuff. So they all need contracts. We tell our staff, it's not impossible for you to do something that has a contract. But it's we just don't see it as much because it does take a lot of layers to get through to have everybody sign off on what needs to be signed off on. So it's unlikely, at least in the Miami context, but not impossible. And then if you can take a moment to search contracts or purchasing on your own websites, just to see that like it is out there, right? I mean, Res Life isn't the only one purchasing a lot of stuff, right? You have academic departments buying mice for their lab animals, for their experiments. So there, a lot of people are buying a lot of different wheels. A Ferris wheel is not outside of the realm of possibility for something that we could be needing a contract for. But it's important to understand what are the rules for signing contracts at your institution and how long does it take. My goodness, sometimes those contracts get caught up in different signatures trying to go through all the steps. So a Ferris wheel tomorrow, no. A Ferris wheel in a month, probably not. A Ferris wheel in 3 months, okay, we can talk. So just thinking through what are those rules around contracts that you have. Okay, so that, okay, and then yeah, policy no-nos. So these are really just things to think about. So catering, you could be fined if you are using outside food in certain spaces on campus. Make sure your residence halls are either part of it or not part of it. You just need to know what the rules are. The vehicles you do take on, I mean, even just personal liability when you drive students. So checking those policies ahead of time. But you don't want to get into a situation and then look at the policy. Like, ooh, I got to do a little fender bender. What does that mean with students? Like, well, just you know that before you even leave. And then contracts. Basically, don't sign anything without talking to someone. So before you sign, consult. You probably won't even be able to be the final signer on a contract because we don't get paid. Well, some of us don't get paid enough to do that. And then just planning early and never pay out of pocket and think you're going to be reimbursed. So it's like, oh, like the contract process takes forever. I'll just pay them out of pocket. The contract will go through. It'll be fine. You could just be out the money. I would be very angry as a supervisor if I had a person like just assume they were going to be reimbursed. I mean, that's just a general money spending policy. Don't do that. Um, so that is the my final thoughts on contracts. Okay. I guess I this might be easier to just kind of raise your hand and just speak instead of type. Remember, I welcome all voices. We're a small but mighty crew. But do you have any weird event production nuances at your institutions? And then how did you even learn about that? Right. And my guess is it's gonna be like I did this thing and I got in trouble, and that's how you learned about it, which is fine. That's we're learning. But yeah, just curious if you had any stories about kind of event production nuances at your schools, and then how did you learn that that was a nuance? And please don't be shy. It's okay to raise your hand. We're not going to see your face. We're just going to hear your voice. All right, let's hear it, Devon.
Yeah, so Devon Vincent Bryan, University of Pittsburgh. I, I am a person that reviews contracts ahead of them moving on to our vice provost, and I did get early on. I got a pushback from our payment processing department because an organization had ordered flowers, and flowers is one of the very few things that is an unallowable expense. Which gives me a little bit of a chuckle because we order things like nitroglycerin and like things that could easily make a bomb for some of our technical clubs. But they were like, these flowers, sir, like you have to have that sign off by like the dean and the vice provost. And I don't know if I ever found the true reason why that is such a well guarded resource. I can assume that at one point someone spent a lot of money on a lot of flowers that people didn't think were necessary. And so now it's just a very monitored expenditure, but flowers are a hard thing to order for an event. It requires not only potentially a contract with a vendor, but also a memo from our vice provost.
That is wild. I mean, it's kind of like, can you just spill the tea a little bit on our weird institution things? That's funny. But yeah, it's like, who needs to be buying flowers for anything? But you're like, well, we maybe for my bouquet thing that I've been talking about all the time. So thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, it's like you wouldn't know until you're kind of at a point where it's like, wow, you got like Miami has strong feelings about food trucks. Okay. Um, but you don't know until you're kind of doing it. Yeah, Ben, what do you got?
Nothing in particular. I just think it's important to always pay attention to, kind of the ever-changing policies. So at a previous institution I was at, we used to have access to a great fleet of vehicles that we could use for different programmatic purchases. And then all of a sudden it was just like the next semester they were gone. Like they were still there, we just couldn't use them. And so the policy just went completely out the window. And then, something that we're actually dealing with here that our institution is trying to navigate right now is our union and our union controlled spaces. So all those things that you've been gushing about. Whereas in the past for like an interdepartmental thing, we haven't been charged in the past. We're now starting to face charges for some of those. And granted, it's at a steep discount compared to what they would charge someone for off campus, but the approach on how the union is doing their business and controlling their spaces has changed over the course of the summer. And so that affects us from the level of like we used to have our weekly staff meetings inside of a union space. And so now we're having to shift and figure out new places to do things completely. And it happened after we had already, set our budget for the upcoming year. And so, it's one of those things that as a planner, it's one of those unexpected, um, changes that you're going to have to navigate at points, where it's just like all of a sudden, oh yeah, by the way, there's this new thing and, you need to figure out how to deal with it. And then I think the other thing is just figuring out like, you know, like for some events, a stakeholder or a partner won't have any, skin in the game. And then all of a sudden they find out about this event that you're hosting and they're like, oh, well, why didn't you come to us, for approval on that thing? And it's like, because we never have. And then now all of a sudden, you're having to navigate that politics and those that red tape within the university. And so, I say in those instances, depending on your level, don't be afraid to punt or call up and say, hey, this is what's going on. I mean, try to work it out yourself. Know that it can lead to, a good working relationship with a partner, but also like don't frustrate yourself over it. And, be willing to accept what's in your sphere of control.
Yeah, it's like I just want to put on a nice event. Why am I like up to my eyeballs in politics? Because they're the politics of space, right? That is absolutely that is a reality in what we're doing. When we're talking about outside of the residential sphere, we get into this kind of stuff. So thank you so much for sharing. And also Kirsten said we can't buy flowers or water bottles. And then Tyler shared where couldn't pay hosting career fair for employers, process payments, wasn't allowed to help certain employers at the event because they were only for the School of Engineering. So again, this politics of space, well, this event was just for this group, so we can't help these people. Okay. And it's hard because as the host, you're kind of making some promises. And then when you can't fulfill them, that's right. Where the thank you note is this like building of reputation. Sometimes these things that are completely outside of our control hurt reputation. So, but it's understanding it. And as Ben said, I think it's like, you gotta roll with it and being graceful with that, which we're going to get to in just a second. So thank you for sharing. I just have to put a huge shout out for our administrative assistant, Rosemary Volk. She is my hero. So Rosemary is the glue in our office, and she is amazing, and she understands what we do and how we spend money, and helps. So he actually used to work in accounts payable, so we have like a super insider. So basically, what I try to tell people is that you don't have to memorize all of these policies and procedures because Rosemary has a really good working knowledge of the university. And I just want you to think about, do you have a Rosemary? Do you have that? It sounds like Devon might be that person for their office. Like I'm in it. I'm reviewing contracts. You don't get sweaty when you're thinking about contracts. I can do that. So, make a new friend, ask for help. And it's also just helping our new staff know like, oh, you're doing a what? Yeah, talk to this person about that. That can help people. But basically Rosemary she's amazing. And I wanted to give her a shout out in this presentation. We did just make an epic change over to Workday. So Miami has shifted away from, or is currently shifting. We did like the finance side. So we've left Banner and now we're moving over into Workday. So if anybody has done this transition, whoo, it is spicy. Because you have all right, Rosemary has had all his knowledge connected to Banner and now is relearning this whole thing in Workday. So she's still going to be in it a lot more than the rest of us. But she is she's just my hero. She's amazing. So I hope you all have a Rosemary Volk in your life because they're wonderful. Okay. So now I think we've kind of alluded to this and we've got about 10 minutes left. But the idea around adapting practice, how do we pivot and problem solve when this stuff goes wrong? So even thinking about this presentation, I have adapted to my new confines, right? That I thought this was going to be a Zoom meeting where I could put you in breakout rooms. That's not happening because we're on a webinar. Okay, right. So Alyssa and I had a little freak out before, minor freak out. But then, okay, how do we use the tools that we have to continue moving forward? And that is exactly what that adaptability, that practice needs to be when you are helping people troubleshoot through events, either yourself or your staff. So I've got a couple scenarios that again, you can raise your hand. My goal here was to put you in breakout rooms, talk and come back. It's okay. But if I'm wondering how you would solve these problems. Again, you can raise your hand or throw it in the chat. So you and your team have an event in 2 weeks, but you just learned you planned it against the homecoming game by accident. What do you do? And this is where you would talk with a friend, but I'm going to need you to think individually and then either wave or throw your problem solving in the chat. Again, I think talking is easier, but if you want to type it out, that's okay. Oh, Ben, you're saving the day. Thanks, Ben. Go for it.
Yeah, so I think in this situation, homecoming's not going to move. It's been set for a while, and so I think it's one of the things where you're probably the more agile group associated with planning, and so you can look at the homecoming schedule and see if maybe you can partner and incorporate your event into the homecoming schedule. Though know that the institution-wide homecoming committee is probably not going to like that too awfully much. And probably the more logical thing since you're 2 weeks out would be, try to identify a date where you can move your event to. Some of that though is going to be affected by if you have contracts or not, if you have, outside stakeholders, internal stakeholders that you plan on having at the event, and just kind of how deep into the programming are you. 2 weeks out, if it's a larger event, you're probably pretty deep into it, and you've already started to advertise a little bit. But if it's maybe just a hall-wide event or something like that, you probably still have some time to pivot and show some agility there. So that's what I would recommend, and that's how I would start problem solving.
Yep.
But as you start to get answers to those questions, you then adjust course accordingly.
Yep. Yeah, so Linda, same thing. Can we adjust the time and get it added to the official list of events? When I did this with our staff, they said, maybe not everybody wants to go to the homecoming game. So is it okay if we leave it? And I was like, that it's more about what do you do with the knowledge, right? Because it doesn't say cancel everything and move it. It could be, hey, we hope you're going to the homecoming game. If for some reason you're not up for it, we're doing this here. Which I was like, I don't love broadly, but like think they were thinking creatively about how they could, now that they know the information, how they can move on. Thank you. Okay. So here's another one. Looks like rain. Your welcome event is going to take place outside on the patio in 3 days, but it's looking like rain. Again, throw it in the chat or raise your hand. You're all pros at event planning. You're like, you didn't have a rain location? What a noob. That's a newbie. Yeah, Max.
You also see what's inside and get ready to go for that. Is
Yep.
option one. Option two, I would say, is are you capable in having a tent?
I love it. Yep. Like, well, we've got this little awning. If we're looking at this beautiful picture of a rainy residence hall at Miami, yeah, like we've got this awning. Can we get a few tents? Maybe we'll be okay. Awesome. Thanks, Max. All right, the food is late. This one seems to be happening more frequently as we make online orders, but your event starts in 30 minutes, but the staff member picking up the food called to let you know the restaurant did not have your order on file. They are working to make it now. It should be done in 2 hours. What's the plan? Cry in the corner. What do you think? The food is late. So the food's coming. It's just not going to be here in a little bit. This is really hard because I cannot see anyone. So with this scenario, the way that our staff thought about it was we could adjust the time of the event. We could, just start the event. And then when the food, tell people the food, instead of having food at the beginning, we're gonna have food at the end. some people were like, you know what, cancel the order. We're just going to buy a taco box and get like 50 tacos from Taco Bell. They had all different kinds of ways to think about how they wanted to make this work. But food is late. I don't know if it's this, like everything seems to be kiosk driven. And I was like, I just want to talk to a person and like, are you going to make my food in 3 hours? Yes, Sarah, I am going to make that Chipotle catering order for you. And then I'm happy because I know that it will be there when I feed them to do. Oh yeah, Linda, see, this is why I love that Linda said, depending on the location, could you bring some of the food? I was actually at a wedding one time. They were catering and this happened. And they were like, okay, can you just give us like the appetizers? Like just give us the front part first. That's a great way to problem solve, Linda. Didn't even think about it. Okay, so next up, technology issues. The karaoke machine isn't connecting via Bluetooth and you can't seem to make it work. The event starts in 15 minutes. What are you doing? This would actually have me crying in the corner. I get really nervous about this. Yeah, Kenzel.
So I'm usually not really good with the technology part and aspects, but I would probably say like, a lot of the students will have like one of those small speaker bars around or like other like wireless Bluetooth speakers. So like maybe see if you can find that or see if you can find like an aux cord or something that have some type of like physical connection between the audio device and like the player.
I think I'm just going to have him call you.
I don't, I was the AV guy back in the day in the restaurant, so that's fair.
That's awesome. Yeah, so like can you phone a friend? Is there somebody who's really good with this tech stuff? The sound bar, I love that idea. I'm seeing here, so a different machine from another department, another hall. Oh, yes, this is Young Gravy. So he was at Miami a few years ago. But right, like, can you just put on YouTube and then just have somebody, just sing kind of over it? Do you need to have the mic? So all those really good problem solving, right? That like you can still have the event. It's just not going to be as you envisioned. Okay, next up, no one came. A faculty member is here to lead an event, but there are only 3 people in the audience. The event was scheduled to start 10 minutes ago. What are some things you can do? Yeah, Max.
Start that event. If those 3 people showed up, let them be.
I agree. And honestly, faculty,
they're happy with 1.
That's a lovely conversation.
That's an intimate conversation that faculty love to have.
Yep. I love it. Other thoughts? So Max says, just keep going. Start the event. It's all good. This might be one where I maybe walk around and see if anybody wants to come down, or just trying to, just make sure that the faculty, and I mean, even before this, I'm helping faculty, I'm mitigating expectations because of like, this is not a class. Nobody has to come to this. So like you have control over your classroom space and you have attendance points you can hang over people's heads. This is a completely at will experience. And so even saying that ahead of time can help if we have 3 people in the audience. But hunting, I love magazines, like we're just going to do it. Okay. And then finally, too many people came. the best kind of problem to have. Yay, more people came to your event than your picture frame painting event than you thought. But you don't have enough supplies or seats for everyone. What's a way that you can help this problem? And I know we're almost out of time, but I just want to hear out how you're going to problem solve this one. Tyler says, gather the info, host another event, and invite them. That's solid, right? Like, oh, I only have 20 picture frames and there's 50 of you. Let me get your names and we'll do something else. That's a great idea. What's another thought? Something that my staff had thought about was roommate pairs. If they came down together, they can color a picture frame together as like a little bonding experience. You can kind of go to your RA closet or wherever your supplies are and see, okay, what else do I have in here that I could just kind of put out for people? But or again, that like we're gonna host another event. I didn't realize how popular this was. What's a good time for everybody? And then planning it off of that. So that's too many people is a nice problem, but it is still a problem for sure. So, well, thank you. Again, if we were in person, we'd be talking about a little bit more of sharing out your tips and tricks. I'm sure you have lots of them, but we are out of time. So thank you so much for coming today. I hope this is helpful. Please reach out. There's my contact information if you'd like the slides or just want to talk programming in general. But I hope this helps you and your RA staff.
I also put the assessment in the chat if you have a second to fill that out. Thanks.
Kings Island is a little closer to me than Cedar Point. Thanks for coming, everybody.